going on, guys? It's Michael MGF, and today I'm going to be doing a massive overview video to showcase my entire collection of custom Iron Man minifigures that I have made dating back to 2013. Now, Iron Man minifigures have been a huge part of the growth of my channel, not just the custom minifigures, but also the collaborative builds of the various Hulkbuster suits in the back. I even made the Hall of Armor at one point for Iron Man 3. Robert Downey Jr. himself actually posted one of my Thanksgiving photos a couple years later, so that was pretty cool. Iron Man suits have just been a minifigure series that I've always enjoyed working on, especially for Captain America Civil War in 2016, Spider-Man Homecoming more recently, and now Avengers Infinity War. So before we make it to Infinity War, I figured what better time than to finally take a step back and look at all of the Iron Man minifigures that I've made in the past. And of course, not every single one is here because there were a few that I made back in like 2012 and before when I was a lot younger. And I found like the remains of like a War Machine I made back then, but that was about it. So we're here with this video, and I'm so glad to finally be making it. This is an idea I've had for a long time, and now we're doing it. But all these Iron Man suits have been showcased at some point in the past, so instead of showcasing them, this is definitely more of a collection video. And of course, immediately after recording the intro, I realized I lied, and at some point in the last 4 years, throughout all the moving my family and I have done, I lost a couple of the suits, so the Mark 7 version 2 and the Mark 4, I believe, will not be present for this video. I have literally absolutely no idea what happened to them, but either way, this was basically the next suit that I started on. This was like the first, this was technically the third Iron Man suit that I made, but it was also, this is also the earliest one that I have, that I still have. But either way, this was originally an upgraded Mark 17 Heartbreaker suit taken from the original Lego sets, and I upgraded it for the original Iron Man 3 showcase, and you'll see even more suits from that video after this. But then after that video, I went back to this figure, got an entirely new armor set from another brickling seller that also made their own custom Iron Man armor pieces, and I got their own their new helmet and their new chest piece when it was new at the time, and this was 4 years ago. But either way, I then painted that entirely new torso piece and helmet for the Mark 17, and I had at the time what I consider to be the ultimate Heartbreaker suit. And hey man, 4 years later, I think it still holds up pretty well. Next up was the Mark 5, or the suitcase armor, or whatever it was called at the time. I don't remember, but it was the suit in Iron Man 2 that came out of Tony's suitcase when he was attacked by Whiplash, of course. And this was basically the first time where I took an Amazing Armory Mark 7 torso piece. An Amazing Armory, they were a brickling seller as well, and there was a whole story behind them. They're not around anymore, but you'll see their torso pieces ever so present throughout this video. And this was the first time where I took one, and again, I repurposed it because it was based, and the design was based on the Mark 7 from the first Avengers. However, I repurposed it to look like the Mark 5 from Iron Man 2, and this is something that I would continue all the way till just last year for Spider-Man Homecoming. And yeah, so you can see all the detail that was included on this figure, all, you know, again, fully painted. This was definitely probably one of my favorite earlier Iron Man suits that I made. I don't know why it has a light gray head, but as you can see, I still had yet to start painting HUDs into the Iron Man suits, and you'll start seeing those pretty soon here, man. I actually don't really know which suit it was when I first started doing that. Next up was the Iron Man Mark 1 from the very first Iron Man film, and God, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even remember how I made the helmet. I think I used a motorcycle helmet as a base, or like one of those, or like really early astronaut helmets, if I'm not mistaken. But you can see I used a wide variety of things here, like a freaking football player torso piece. I think I drilled a hole through the center. I used brick-forged van braces, these brick-forged shoulder pads. I honestly have no idea how I made the knees. These things on the sides were little bits of plastic. No idea how I made all this crap on the back. I'm pretty sure this came from like a brick-forged something bow. I forget which bow, this little piece here, that wheel. But this was definitely a really fun suit to make, I remember. And eventually Breakthrough Army did come out with their own entirely sculpted and super well detailed Mark 1. Like, it wasn't even just a torso piece. It was like an entire sculpt, you know, like an entire sculpted minifigure. I just never actually got to paint it, and I always ended up just sticking with the original Mark 1 that I made back in 2013. But it was I'm pretty proud of this one, man. I mean, again, 4 years later, these figures still hold up. Funny story behind the Mark II. I made this figure in a day. No joke, one day is all I needed to make this entirely silver Iron Man suit. And of course, this was Tony's second suit that he made in Iron Man 1. And this one, I actually used what I think was Amazing Armory's Mark III torso piece. No idea for sure. Again, their Bricklink store, they've been shut down for a long time. And I have no way of knowing, or at least I just haven't done the research. Either way, this was definitely pretty cool. Did I start painting the HUDs with this one? Yeah, I did. Hey, look, I put some blue in there. Then so began the Iron Man 3 showcase with the Mark 42. And I remember at Comic-Con 2012, I think, after the first Avengers, when we all saw that the next Iron Man suit for the next Iron Man solo film was going to be like tan, and that was super cool. So, of course, I got to work in spring of 2013 on the Iron Man 3 minifigures. This, of course, was the first one, and another one in which I repurposed the Amazing Armory Mark 7 torso piece to look like in another suit entirely. I should really probably stop mentioning that because I'll eventually start having to mention it for every single suit you'll see throughout this video. However, this was one of the early suits where I did actually start painting in the HUDs and adding a little bit of detail. And as you can see, if you've seen any of my Iron Man suits recently in the last couple of years, you can tell this is a very outdated design. It was literally just some blue and like some light blue squares, like a circle thing. I tried, but the design definitely evolved eventually. So yeah, this was definitely a really cool suit to make, and it was kind of game-changing, in a way. Not really. Of course, that was followed up by the Iron Patriot suit, and this was another super cool and unique Iron Man suit from Iron Man 3. Suits like these and the Iron Legion are really what keep that movie, still watchable. But either way, you can see the most unique thing about this figure, of course, are the colors and everything, but the mounted gun on his right shoulder was pretty interesting to make. I remember this was like a bottom piece of some kind of brick forge weapon that I used, and then I took one of their walkie-talkies, trimmed down the antenna, and I shoved it into that little post there, and eventually ended up with what I thought was a pretty decent mounted gun. Now, looking at it, it looks like a keychain with a walkie-talkie stuck in it, but I mean, hey man, it was 2013, standards were different, but you can see I also did paint that very same HUD into this face mask as well. The Heartbreaker suit had already been showcased at this point, so it was just kind of like a stand-in for the video. However, the Gemini, the Mark 49, this was definitely another really unique suit to have made, because of course it was like the white Iron Man suit, the first ever white one, and of course it was made because out of Tony's precautions, if he ever had to go to space and do what he did at the end of the first Avengers again, he would have the Mark 49. So this was definitely a really cool suit, and you can see that I don't even remember if the helmet or the face mask can still open. I guess we're about to find out the hard way. I don't think it did. Oh, was I supposed to do that? This figure's really old. Obviously, there was no HUD in there. Okay, let's just put that back on and pretend like that never happened. But you can see on the back, I did sculpt this really crappy like booster pack or like this jetpack thing. And I mean, I'm pretty sure I made this out of sticky tack. I don't know how I let this fly, but I mean, I think it did its job. It kind of looks like a seat. But that's okay. It was still a really cool and super fun Iron Man suit to make. I don't even remember what I used as a base for this guy. I think that this was originally... I'm not gonna lie, man. I don't know what that torso piece is from. Next up, the Mark 40 shotgun suit. This was another really unique suit to make, and one of the last figures I think I made before settling on a much better dark gray paint, because this was the dark gray. It's kind of like more of has like a green tint to it. But either way, it still worked out pretty well, I think, for this figure back then. And you can see I used an Amazing Armory. I think this was the Mark III chest piece, and it might have been the first time I used it, where I filled in the center as well to get that rectangular arc reactor. And then of course, what makes this suit really unique was the face mask. And did I paint a HUD into this one? This is always... No, I didn't. But this is I haven't looked at these figures in a long time. And of course, the Igor suit. And this was not the final version that ended up in the video. This was actually the first version that I commissioned Legoholic to construct for the video following the release of the very first Iron Man 3 trailer that showed what we thought at the time was the Hulkbuster suit. Turned out to be the Igor suit, and it was a lot smaller and blue. So while this build by Legoholic was fantastic and super articulated and still is really cool to this day, it was totally inaccurate. We both realized that and ended up doing a second version. So with the second version, you can see we got the color right, the scale is right. However, he did have to compromise on the proportions and I think with a little bit with the articulation for sure. But this was, man, I can't believe how long ago this was. This is such a cool little build that did such a great job topping off that first big Iron Man 3 showcase. And I was able to add my own painted details to the head. But this was just so cool. And it just really made that entire first video come together. That was really the first big video where I started doing those big showcases, and this just definitely helped kickstart that whole idea. I think the Mark 41 bone suit had the privilege of being the very first spin-off showcase I did from a larger video, that being the Iron Man 3 showcase, of course. And let's see if I painted in a HUD. Hey, I did. I got a blue screen in there, so there's that's cool. It looks like Tony's suit crashed. I don't know. Either way, Mark 7 repurposed torso piece, and it doesn't actually have that feature where it like dismantles and flies around in several different pieces. But man, I wish that younger me had waited a few years, or probably not, because this is still a really cool figure. But Brickforge, I think, came out with like separating minifigure parts last year, which are really cool, and I have yet to get my hands on those, but it would have been so perfect for this figure all those years ago. Eventually, I followed up that video with the upgraded Heartbreaker suit that you've seen twice already in this video, but also the Red Snapper and Silver Centurion. I think the Red Snapper was hands down one of the most challenging figures I made back then. Most people didn't really like how he kind of had a beer belly, or at least I think that's what people called it back then. I personally didn't like how the actual like clamps and the claws stuck so far out from the arms, so this was definitely not a perfect minifigure by any stretch, but I did use one of these helmets from, I think it was either Amazing Armory or Breakthrough, can't remember which. However, I did sand down the sides and I filled in the eyes to achieve the look of the Red Snapper that you see right here. And this suit was in the movie for like all of what, like 30 seconds. Either way, there's the back. Don't even know how I made that, but it's pretty cool all these years later. I mean, does it hold up as well? Probably not. But the Silver Centurion was another super cool suit in the movie that Tony actually wore for at least more than a minute. And you can see that on this one, I mean, I think it was pretty solid. Eventually, Breakthrough did come out with their own Silver Centurion chest piece. Never did get to use this on a version 2 of this figure. However, I did take a Mark 7 torso piece and I sanded down the shoulders, and I also sculpted over the arc reactor to get that shape that you see there. I think the one downside to this figure was definitely like the actual like blades that came out of the wrists. I just kind of, I think these were like bayonets from brick arms or something, and I just kind of glued them onto the sides of the hands. How these haven't broken off in the last 4 years baffles me. But eventually Lego came out with their own Silver Centurion, which I think is probably a little bit cooler than this old custom minifigure I did. And let's see if it has a HUD. It does not. Okay. And the one Iron Man suit that I never finished, that nobody ever seems to let me live down, the disco suit. I had just about had enough of making Iron Man suits after Iron Man 3 in 2013, and I didn't try again until February of 2014, attempting to make another unique suit from the Iron Legion in the form of the disco suit, using purple, metallic purple, and all these orange highlights. The neon orange that I tried to use for this figure, it was really difficult to work with, and I didn't like this neon orange, and so I kind of got bored of making the figure, didn't like the paint. So I just never finished it, and like 3.5 years later, 4 years later, nobody lets me forget it. Now, eventually, almost a full year later, of course, it came time to make figures for Avengers Age of Ultron, and that also included commissioning Legoholic yet again to build the Hulkbuster suit, and this was so cool, yet so controversial for so many people, because it was completely my fault when I told Legoholic, okay, we need to keep this to scale, and we also need to have it keeping the ability to seat a minifigure inside. So, managed to do it. Totally my fault that the proportions ended up being off, and there have been some fantastic Hulkbuster suits by so many fantastic mock builders throughout the community in the years that have since passed. And now Lego, on top of the 2 Hulkbusters that they have now made for Age of Ultron and the one coming up for Infinity War, there's going to be a collector's edition Hulkbuster, and pictures just leaked of it a couple days ago. It looks so cool, but it just isn't to scale, which is totally fine, because really originally this one should never have been to scale. scale, and we really should have let go of that whole, keeping it to scale with a Hulk big fig to just make for an overall better looking build. And again, totally my fault. I still did paint on a few details like the arc reactor and some detail onto these, this slope and these tiles, etc., etc. It still is really cool. I still think all these years later, this is a really cool build. It still to this day doesn't bother me as much as it did seem to bother most people, but either way, like I said, still a really cool model. And this build of the Hulkbuster, I mean, I don't know if we're going to end up doing another one for Infinity War, probably not. But this one, like I said, probably about 4 or 5 times already at this point, is pretty cool, to this day, still pretty cool. And of course, we can't forget about the Mark 43 from Age of Ultron, probably one of my least favorite Iron Man suits I ever made. It's not like it's really that bad, it just wasn't that exciting. It felt very standard by the time I finished it, and the printed design on the legs didn't really mesh too well with the detail I painted on. However, this was the first time when I did paint in an entirely new HUD design that I still ended up using all the way to Spider-Man Homecoming, and I may or may not change it up for Avengers Infinity War. However, I think it was definitely a much needed change following those random blue screens you saw scattered throughout various, older iterations of Iron Man suits. So yeah, after Age of Ultron, for a spin-off showcase, I got to work on War Machine and the Mark 45 from the third act of Age of Ultron. And it wasn't revealed that War Machine was going to be in the movie until way late in the game, that Rhodey would be suiting up as War Machine yet again. And so this figure, I remember, was definitely really fun to paint. We moved to a different part of North Carolina, and I got in a whole new setup, and I was just having a really great time painting this figure, especially all the different symbols and designs and details throughout. This was just a really, really fun figure for me to make. And then this gun, like the actual mounted gun for this figure, as opposed to Iron Patriot's walkie-talkie, I actually pulled this off of like a miniature War Machine figurine that was being sold by Hasbro. They did it for both Age of Ultron and then eventually Civil War the following year, but this mounted gun was basically perfectly in scale with Lego minifigure, so I chopped it off of that action figure and then glued it on to the repurposed Amazing Armory Mark 7 chest piece. And then of course, this was also when I finally started to paint new HUDs, which I already mentioned with the Hulkbuster. So instead, for War Machine, as opposed to the blue, I've got it in here with a pretty cool neon green, and that was definitely a pretty fun thing to paint that HUD in an entirely different color for the first time. And then also, you got a HUD in the Mark 45 suit as well, same design, and you can see this one was actually pretty cool because with the Mark 45, I put up a poll on Twitter back then to decide if I wanted to use the actual Mark 45 face mask that was provided in the sets, even though it's slightly more inaccurate. And eventually people actually decided that, yeah, I was to use this face mask, even though the eyes didn't exactly look like the eyes of the Mark 45. It still added a unique spin to the figure, and most people seem to agree. And also, this was the first Iron Man suit where I had actually painted red highlights through and through. So there are red highlights all throughout this suit, and it was definitely, it was pretty cool, man. Hopefully I kept that in focus long enough. Probably not. Almost a year later, it would come time to make this pair yet again. In April of 2016, during the crunch to make 11 minifigures to celebrate the movie in 1 month. And these two figures were a couple of those 11. And you can see with the 46, I carried over a couple elements in the form of the bright red areas, scattered about in between, different areas of the suit all throughout the entirety of the design, just to make it just as vibrant as the 45 was the previous year. And you can see I've got the HUD painted in there as well, but it was super exciting to finally make the Civil War suit at the time. And you can see I do have the black eye painted underneath Tony's right eye, and at the time, Lego had released their Silver Centurion polybag, and they had the black eye printed under the left eye, which wasn't screen accurate to Civil War. Not that they were trying to be screen accurate, but I was, so I ended up having to paint my own black eye, so that was a thing. And then with Rhodey, oh my god, was this different from the one I made from Age of Ultron. All of the upgrades that you can see featured here with all the, different, and, I definitely went for more gray outlines throughout the entirety of this suit. And you can see that I even have like his staff that he had used, and this was based off of concept art. In the movie, it was more of like an orange color, but you can thank Hot Toys for that because their figure had this entire staff with all of its details in a red color. So that was a thing. And this was used, this was made using like a Brickforge cricket bat, I believe. So that was a thing. And And then also the turret mounted on his left shoulder is considerably different from the Age of Ultron model because, like I said, Hasbro had released that small miniature War Machine for Civil War again the following year, featuring the actual new turret as well. And so I did the same thing for Age of Ultron using the new gun. However, I mounted it on the left shoulder because he does have a track on the back of both of his Age of Ultron suit and his Civil War suit, and he can actually adjust the turret and it can be moved from one shoulder to the other. However, in Civil War, he mostly had it on the left side throughout the entirety of the movie. And you can see I have all kinds of 3D elements scattered about on this entire figure, and in most ways, this was just a major upgrade from the Age of Ultron figure I had done in the previous year. And of course, just like the Age of Ultron suit, I do have the HUD painted in there as well. And as you can see, it's not cooperating, but now there it is, same green HUD, same design, still a design that I think I even used on the Homecoming suit. I don't even remember, I guess we'll find out, but it was a pretty cool design, man. And also, I don't think I ever showed War Machine or really any of my Iron Man suits with their torso armor off, but eventually I did find out these are actually Ultron drone tallies on the top right corner of the suit. I painted those on without even knowing what they were, so that's a thing. And finally, at the end of the video, our last suit from Spider-Man Homecoming this past summer with the Mark 47. This was another suit that was really fun to make. However, I think it was finally the suit at which point where I kind of took a step back and looked at it and I was like, how many times am I going to repurpose the Mark 7 torso piece from Amazing Armory? So for Age of Ultron, I am exploring other options. We'll see how it pans out. But with the Mark 47 for Spider-Man Homecoming, of course, carrying over those same bright red highlights that I mentioned with the 45 and 6. However, you can see with the HUD inside, I did carry over that same design once again, probably one last time before I change the design. I don't know if I will. I'm still pretty fond of that design to this day. Let me know if you guys are down in the comments. But either way, you can see this one definitely has a wide variety of detail, mostly on the legs, which was definitely pretty difficult and very intricate to paint, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Probably some of the best painted legs I've done on any of these Iron Man suits, period. So yeah, the Mark 47 and every Iron Man suit I have ever made. And now, I don't know what else to say. We're done. Cool. Alright guys, there you go. That is it for the entire video showcasing all of my Iron Man suits that I've made over the last, what year is it? 25 years. And yeah, so if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to let me know by dropping this video a comment down below. And thank you so much for sticking around for the whole thing. As you might have noticed, this was shot on a new camera. I am now using the Canon 80D with a pretty sweet mic on top of it. And I mean, I think it's pretty good. I mean, you can let me know down in the comments. I don't really know much about cameras, but I figured it was finally time to invest in a new kit. And hopefully this will work out because I'm still within the 30-day window to return things and I still have more settings to fiddle with. But you don't need to know any of that. What you do need to know is that now I'm going to be bringing videos to you guys in much better quality than I was previously using with my $250 crappy camcorder that I got in 2013 when I started making all these Iron Man suits. No idea how I've been able to run my channel using that thing for so long, but hopefully this will be better, this will look better, and you'll be able to see my figures and everything that I bring to the channel in greater detail from this point forward. So thank you guys. That's it. I'm going to get back to working on Avengers Infinity War. I've got the roster constantly fluctuating, not knowing if Wasp is going to be in the movie or not, among other things that I'm thinking about, but more so I've been working on Thanos, and I'm hoping I'll be able to get the first preview photo up on all my social media pages, which are always linked below, down in the description below, prior to the Super Bowl, because apparently there's going to be a new trailer, like a TV spot, kind of like Civil War. Anyway, I'm going to go. That's it. Okay, bye. Much better quality because I think this has definitely been a long time. That's a text. Another bigger major video. Okay, there's dust on this guy still. These were in a case. Why is there dust on them? Wow, look at how bad that's going out. Oh shit. And of course, immediately after with much better quality, hopefully guys, you